Simone, welcome. I just wanted to let you know that I have spotlighted you, so you are fully centre stage for our session. So welcome and thank you. And I'll make a start as others drop in. So start with karakia, e noi tātou, e te atua, e tēnei wā, kia tau taurangamari, ki runga ana iwi, o te ao, ameni. I will welcome everybody to our session on the new needs assessment tools that have recently been released, and it's a really great opportunity, Simone, to have you here to talk us through those. Who better than NASCA itself, who I know has been keeping a close eye on the development and rollout of the new tools that we'll be talking about today. Just wanting to acknowledge the fuel crisis that we're all sitting within. And so just once Simone has finished her part of the session, for those who are interested, I'll just give a little bit of an update on what NZDSN is doing in that space. But in the meantime, Simone, I'm going to hand over to you and let you introduce yourself and start your presentation on these very interesting tools that I know our members are really interested. You can see the large number of people in attendance, and it'll be great to hear from you about how these are rolling out and what providers should expect when using them in their context.
Yeah, thanks for that, Debbie. So I think probably most of you know me. So my name is Simone Newsham. I'm the CEO of NASCA. So Debbie invited me to come along and talk about the changes that were implemented on the 1st of April, and also the changes that were supposed to be implemented in February, but due to the Manage My Health and Medimap cyber security, that was delayed while they did some pretty extensive cyber testing of the new assessment tool. So I've got a few slides that I will go through, and then I thought you might be interested in looking at the assessment itself. So I can run you through a fake assessment that you'll get to have a look at what it entails. Sound good? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And let's go back to the beginning. Okay, can you all see that? Debbie, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Yep. Okay, excellent. Cool. Okay, so things I'm going to talk about today is the OBIA, the indicative range process, the MyDSS funding plan, and the flexible funding tiers that started on the 1st of April. Okay, so just a quick run through the process. There is a new pre-assessment process that has been introduced. So that means any new referral will get a letter outlining the process for the assessment, and giving them some guidance as to what to start thinking about and the sort of areas that there will be they'll be asked about when the NASC comes along to have that conversation. So then the next stage from that is the interview and the discussion. So NASCA's been pretty clear. So DSS has talked about the OBIA as the assessment. From our perspective, it is not the assessment. The assessment is the interview and the discussion. And then the OBIA, which stands for outcome-based indicative range, just in case you were interested, the OBIA is what the information is recorded on. So it's quite similar to the band allocation tool, in that the information is gathered in a qualitative, strength-based interview process, and then the information is collated on the BAT or the OBIA. And then, as you know, you go from the BAT to the global pricing tool. In the community-based process, we complete the OBIA, and then the information on the OBIA goes to an indicative range. So that's currently being done by DSS, but in the future it will be done within the OBIA. So the information in the OBIA will just generate an indicative range, but in the interim it's going to DSS with some NASCA input to have that indicative range calculated externally. And I think that is just so they can monitor it, monitor the process and monitor the algorithms and that sort of thing. And then once you've got the...
can I...
Yep, sure.
Sorry, do you mind if I jump in on and ask some questions along the way? Can I just ask, so what is the outcome? What's the B stand for?
Outcome-based.
Indicative range. So what is that tool? Like, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what that tool is actually doing, or am I jumping in too early?
Hold that thought. If you can't,
okay.
If you haven't got a better understanding of that by the time I finish, then we'll come back to it. But I think you will. Okay, so once the indicative range comes out, and so far we're seeing indicative range that's quite narrow, so probably within $1,000 or $2,000. So it might be between 15 and 17,000, or we're early days, but the ones I've seen so far have been quite a tight indicative range. And then you take that indicative range and that goes into the My DSS funding plan. So all of I'll show you as we go through. So as I say, the indicative, the OBIA, the outcome-based indicative range, there are 4 different life stages: preschool, primary, intermediate, high school, and adult. The stages that I've heard of previously that are in development are preparing for retirement, parents stepping back, and leaving school. So I haven't had that confirmed yet, but at this stage that looks like it's going to be the next life stages that will be in development. So I was going to show you the OBIA, so I'm just going to if I go to that, it might ask me to completely, yeah, it does. So I'm going to stop sharing and change my screen. There we go. So can you see the new assessment screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So this is basically what it looks like online, the online tool. I'll show you the mind map version shortly. But when we complete the OBIA, when we put the information into the OBIA, this is what it looks like. So the first stage is My Good Life. So you can see up here, all of these are the components of the assessment. So here is the bit that you would type in all about the disabled person, who they are, what their good life story is. So that's a very qualitative description of the person. So as you can see, there's 4,000 words that you can enter into that. And then up here, you can see there are some questions that need to be answered. So these are yes/no questions. I like to explore my environment, but may wander beyond where you expect. Frequent seizure activity. So there's a whole range of these questions that are more quantitative. So the expectation isn't that you would ask these questions verbatim. This is the information that you need to gather through that discussion process. Okay, and then there are some reflection questions there. So these, you'll note that you're making a determination about what the person can do independently and what they may be able to do with support. So in this instance, it's independently, my whānau networks mean that I expect to have some of the opportunities to contribute and be valued and access the good things in my life that my peers do. Okay, so that's the question that you're looking to answer. If you're not quite clear what to put there, you can click that and it gives you some responses. So you pick the response that you think is most applicable to that person, and we can ask these things directly if you're not sure, but you pick which one is most appropriate. There's 3 different sections, and then based on your responses to that, it will add the response up here. So I expect to have most of the opportunities to contribute and be valued. Does that make sense? So you don't have to do that bit. You can just go directly from here. But if you're not quite sure which one, then this will help guide you to the selection there. So if I change it to down here, you can see it's already changed the response up there. Okay, so that's kind of the process through the whole thing. Again, there's some profile ones in here. How many people does it usually require you to carry out the support? The way I express my emotion is often in a way that's safe for me and others. These events occur mostly when I'm out during the day, and I may require somebody checking in and redirecting me. And then there are some medical questions around basically around safety, exploring my environment, maintaining boundaries, that sort of thing. Okay, and so as you go through, it follows a very similar process: achievements, things that I'm proud of, things that I want to achieve, decisions that are important for me to be part of. This is, of course, this is the adult one. So when you're looking at the preschool one, the questions are different and much more focused on the support network. So again, we've got those important information questions and the reflection questions. I am sometimes in control of how my will and preference is determined and communicated. Okay, and again, you can use these statements to guide which selection you make. Okay, so you go through all of these sections, which are very similar. What creates a sense of safety? Aspirations, what would a substantial break look like? We've given some feedback about the wording. Not sure why a substantial break is under aspirations rather than carers and support, that sort of thing. And yeah, so going through all of those, and what's involved in managing and being controlled in my day. So you go through all of these, and then what you can do, you're not required to, but you can go through and identify areas that you would add to the My DSS funding plan. So if, for example, sustaining whānau well-being, you'd say, what's the purpose of that? It might be taking a more substantial break. You would complete the timeline, which of course is usually a year. And then you can enter, let's say you're going to put 20 days of carer support yearly, and then you put in the total cost is, I think, $80. So I think it's 86 now, isn't it? And it will calculate the total cost, which is not correct there. So, and then managed by self-managed. 20 days. Why does that come up as 1,700? Anyway, so this is just the test site. This isn't the production site. So that's how you go through, and then you can add that support and that will come through at the end of when you move to the My DSS funding plan. So that's kind of the process. As I say, it goes through all these different questions so we've developed a prompt sheet, if you will, for the NASCs to go out with, so that they can make sure that they don't miss any of the information. There are certainly some NASCs that are looking at going out and filling this out live with the disabled person, but that's going to be determined by the disabled person, whether they're comfortable with that being done sort of on a laptop live, or whether we would still go out with paper to gather that information as we go along. And then as we go through here, again, there are some more questions. Disabled person's condition is newly acquired, whether they're likely to deteriorate, whether it's likely to improve. So just some life transition questions that we would go through. And then it all comes out in a summary at the end.
And is
Okay,
that
so that's a very whistle stop.
Is that is what comes out at the end the DSS plan?
It's the outline of a DSS plan. So what happens is it will go. So once we've completed the assessment process, then it goes to the indicative range. And when you get your indicative range back, that's when you formally finalize the My DSS funding plan. Because at this stage, you don't know what your indicative range is going to be. This is just the information gathering stage. So
what about the front end, Simone? What about the needs assessment process? Is there a more structured way of doing needs assessments? Is something being rolled out that is nationally consistent now? Has that changed or not?
Let me, okay, I'm going to go back to my presentation because I've got some examples in there.
And just checking, there was a question about the needs assessor is filling this out with the client or after the interview, and I think you did answer that to say that it could be either, and that's been considered. Is that right?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So some people are going to be more comfortable with this being done online as they're having that conversation. Other people are not. So it's going to be dependent on the disabled person really and their whānau. Okay, so this is the example of the mind map. So this is so again, this is the primary and intermediate one. So this is the consistent information gathering process
for the needs assessment.
For the needs assessment process. Yep. So what was previously the needs assessment process. So you don't have to use this. You don't have to use this. You can use a different no. You can use a different mute myself. Just sorry, to mute myself. Yeah. So you don't have to use this model. You can use you can use a different model, but this is certainly the one that's been put out. And interestingly enough, this is the model that we trialed. So prior to Christmas, there was some testing that happened, and it was this mind map model that we used, not the online version. So the so this is certainly our preference. NASCA's preference is that we use this model to go out and gather the information and then put it into the OBIA afterwards. And the reason that that's NASCA's preference is to maintain the person-centered approach. Like I like this because literally the person is in the center, whereas the OBIA just seems a bit less personalized. Okay, I'll just go to some of the questions, if that would be helpful. If different models are being used for needs assessments, how do we get consistency? So the consistency comes from the fact that the same information is entered into the OBIA. So what would be different is how you're gathering that information. But the information that you're gathering and put into the OBIA is consistent. So it's perfectly appropriate that you would not gather information from somebody in the same way. So it's not, it depends what you call the assessment, and this is what we're really clear about, is the OBIA is not the assessment, it's the collation of the assessment information. I mean, you could argue that there is no assessment process anymore. So we're gathering information and then we're putting it into the OBIA to make sure that we're all gathering the same information. How you gather that information may be different. There may be cultural differences, there may be regional differences, there's certainly going to be individual differences about how you gather the information, but we're all gathering the same information because we have to complete the OBIA.
So that's a risk. Simone, can I just jump in there? There's quite a risk there, isn't there? Because from what we've seen, the OBIA has quite a number of set areas that you need to fill in, and different things create the final outcome. If the needs assessment process doesn't appropriately gather all that information, then the OBIA is not going to be effective for a person, is it? So is there thinking about how that risk is mitigated?
No, you have to complete all the fields in the OBIA. You have to.
Okay.
So if you haven't gathered all the information, you'd have to go back.
Okay.
Which of course we don't want to do. So the information that is being gathered is mandatory. So everybody has to be gathered in the same. Every information can be gathered in the same way.
Okay.
Okay, Pip. If somebody's being already receiving 24-hour support, so if they're in the community, yes. If they're being supported in the community, then yes, this is the process that they would use. If they're in residential, which is more likely if they're getting 24/7 support, then that we follow the BAT process for that. Carissa, leading that on.
So is that the point, Simone, where the NAS decides whether a person would have community-based support versus residential care? Is that the why somebody would go through OBIA versus BAT?
That's no different than the process now. At some point, somebody goes through the process of going onto a residential support contract. If they're going through a residential contract process, then we need to do the BAT and the GP2 to be able to price that.
Yeah.
So if they're not going through that residential contract, they're staying in the community, which includes CICL, then it's the OBIA process.
Right. And
so who decides, to answer Carissa's, who decides if the person is going through OBIA or BAT? That's the same process as we currently do. If the person requires residential care, what we don't have at the moment, which we're keen to develop, is what constitutes residential care. When is residential care required? We don't, that isn't particularly clear at this stage. It's more around what's available and whether the person wants to go into residential. So when we don't have a consistent sort of entry into residential care criteria or guidance, which I think is probably lacking. So hopefully that answers that question. Tony, how can a person get a copy of what's written in the OBIA before it's confirmed into the system? If people cannot confirm the data before it's entered into the system, then they would be significantly impacted by the track. So it goes into the OBIA, and then before you confirm it, it's downloaded, and then that is sent to the disabled person to get approval, sign off, confirmation that it's a true reflection of the conversation that you had before it progresses. Same as is done now. So assessments are managed in that way now. So that's the process for that.
Simone, if you like, I can share some of these questions with you as well, rather than you having to do both of them.
Okay.
Question on the mind map model relating to the BAT. It doesn't look like it's asking for the critical information consumed by the BAT. Do you have any thoughts on how the needs assessment process that works through to the BAT process in GPT?
Well, this isn't the BAT process. This is the
No,
OBIA process.
but the needs assessment is the first step, right? So everybody needs a needs assessment, and that and then we decide whether or not they go to OBIA or BAT. Do we have a view of how this needs assessment process is informing what is required in the BAT tool in order to get a good, placement for that person?
I think we need to shift our thinking a little bit. That the information that we gather is then, so the OBIA and the BAT are simply they simply determine the information that we need to gather. So if we can't complete the BAT based on the conversation that we've had with the person, we have to have that conversation with the person again to make sure that we can satisfy all the questions and all the information requirements of the BAT tool, which we would do anyway. I mean, it's not like you go out and have a conversation with somebody not knowing whether they're going residential or community, and then you never speak to them again, and you go down the community, you go down the residential. That just wouldn't happen. That's not how it works. So you'd go back to the person and you'd have another conversation with them about whether they want to move into down the residential track, and at that point you kind of switch your thinking from the information required for the OBIA to the information that's required for the BAT. So again, like it's not a OBIA leading on to a BAT. They're two actually separate processes.
Yeah. But the front process is the needs assessment, and that remains holier than grail, quite frankly, because that's the interview where you talk about the person's needs, right? And then these tools get applied into the process.
There's a conversation. There's an information gathering process. Then you complete the OBIA or the BAT using the information you've gathered from that person. So whether you call that conversation a needs assessment, or whether you call the OBIA or the BAT the needs assessment, to be honest, is somewhat immaterial. The reality is that in the process from referral to services, whether services are residential or whether services are community, we need to gather certain information from the disabled person and their whānau. Now, the information we gather is going to be different for somebody who's being supported in the community than it would be for the person that is going into residential. It's just going to be different. So we need to make sure that we're taking the disabled person along with us on that journey to make sure we're gathering the right information for the services that are going to best meet their needs.
Great, thank you. Another question. This does not seem to support adults with complex needs. It seems to be on assuming what the person can and wants to do without consideration for the support needs to achieve this. It seems to be aimed at those more able to communicate needs.
I'm not sure I agree with that statement. I think it's I think that this, if anything, the concerns are more that it has become close. It's moved further. My concern is that it's actually moved further away from the sort of social model of disability, because we're asking very specific questions about safety and clinical needs, which is always something that hasn't necessarily been captured. So I'm actually not sure I agree that it doesn't meet the needs of the complex people. I mean, you've only seen a very brief overview of it. I think
I have to disagree wholeheartedly there with you, Simone. I'll just say that out loud. Sorry, I'm butting in, but totally disagree with that. Representing complex community, that is just not true. That's just rubbish. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, it would be very helpful if providers could see the BAT. Now, Simone, I know that's not in your wheelhouse. Then we can ensure that we are prepared alongside the disabled person. Any thoughts on how the BAT is treated from a NASC perspective and how providers interact with that?
We've asked for more guidance on this. I think the BAT, certainly the information, the narrative, the storytelling part of the BAT can most certainly be shared with providers. There's no reason that can't be shared. What we are not clear on is it's not so much the BAT, it's more the GPT stuff that we're not clear on how much of that we can share. So we've asked for more guidance on that.
Yeah, and NZDSN is also working with DSS to make the GPT assumptions more transparent, and hopefully we'll be able to share the outcome of that with members, because that is still quite shrouded in mystery as far as the assumptions go that we're not clear on. Seems to me, I think this is a couple of comments. Seems to me it'd be good to have a consistent assessment process prior to decisions re-BAT or OBIA, and residential services are community, of course.
Yes, yeah.
So I think, certainly, Simone, my learning from today's session has been that I thought there was a consistent needs assessment being rolled out that all NASCs were required to use, and then they had these other tools, i.e. OBIA and BAT, that they were required to use using the information from the needs assessment process. But I obviously was not correct in my assumption, and what it certainly looks like from my perspective is that we now have two tools, BAT and OBIA, that are driving the requirements of the needs assessment, i.e. you have to include this information, but how you go about collecting and gathering that may be unique to the person that you're actually working with. Is that a fair summary?
The only bit I would challenge you on is the need, that there isn't a consistent needs assessment, and I think it's about challenging our thinking about what a needs assessment is. An assessment of need is a conversation with the disabled person and their whānau, making sure we get that information. The consistency comes from the fact that regardless of how you gather that information, the same information has been gathered. So if you prefer to refer to the OBIA as the consistent needs assessment, that's fine. It's from a NASC perspective, though, we've been really clear that what we don't want is for people to be going out and asking these questions verbatim as a semi-structured kind of interview process. That's not what we want, because we don't think that really I struggle to see the EGL principles on a basis of a semi-structured interview question and answer process. We have worked really hard with NASCs to move away from that and to gather information in a more support narrative-based information gathering process. So that hasn't changed. We're still gathering information, but the consistency comes in the fact that we are all gathering the same information, and funding decisions will all be based on the same information. And that's where your consistency comes.
And you don't see any issues with the reverse of that being true, i.e. NASCs don't collect the essential information in the first instance in order for them to properly feed that into either of these tools?
But they do. They do properly gather that information, because if they didn't, they couldn't fill out the OBIA.
Okay.
So so that's why we've developed lots of prompt sheets for people to take out, to make sure that you're asking, that you're gathering the right information, so that you don't miss anything for when you go back to complete the OBIA, using the information that you've just gathered from the discussion. So those prompt sheets are there to make sure that the assessor doesn't miss anything, and then they can go and complete the OBIA later, or the BAT if they're heading to residential.
Cool, thank you. A few more questions have come in. I'll just read those out. I can't understand how the calculation part gets filled in by the assessor. How does this tool check what kind of support the person wants, e.g. if community support or IF respite is better, or HCSS as an example?
Yeah, those are conversations you would be having with the disabled person. So that bit that I showed you with the calculation, that is optional. That can be filled in, or it doesn't need to be filled in. That doesn't lead into what the indicative range will be. That's just a place that you can record what the disabled person and their whānau have expressed as their preference. And then that feeds into the My DSS plan. And when you get your indicative range, you go back to the whānau and you go, okay, this is what we talked about last time. We've got the indicative range. It looks like we can get everything we talked about last time I was here, or actually the indicative range has come back and we can't quite get everything we asked for. Let's have a conversation about how we want to allocate this funding that we've been identified within the indicative range. So it's not a case of the calculation happens. The calculation happens from the information in the OBIA, not those support, not that support bit that I showed you. That is there so we can record what the disabled person has said that their preference would be, so that it's there when we come back. Yeah.
So there's a few comments which I'll read out. They're not necessarily questions. From what I've seen so far, the BAT doesn't ask questions about will and preference, choice and control opportunities like my peers, etc., that you have outlined with the OBIA. This risks people who receive community residential support having less access to a good life than people supported in other models. Another comment, people and their whānau don't always know what is relevant to disclose, so support needs often get missed.
And that's the purpose of the purpose of the pre-assessment letter, so that they get some guidance as to what to be thinking about. It's likely that we will send out this mind map that you can see on the screen at the moment to give them an idea of what it is what sort of information we'll be gathering.
For sure. Another comment relating to the quality of needs assessment, it's the breadth and depth of the information gathered to complete the OBIA. It comes once again to the quality of information gathering and the collector's competency. Question, can the disabled person and their whānau get a copy of the completed OBIA?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Have any test assessments been done which ascertain whether different needs assessors who have assessed the same person get the same funding outcome through the OBIA?
Yes.
And?
Yeah, it was tested, and I think that's why they're doing this. This first section is done by a central team. So there's kind of a review process to make sure that it's reasonably consistent. I mean, the training, we all know this has been done at speed, and the training has been, I would say, less than ideal. So it is going to take some time to make sure that everybody's completing it in the same way. But yes, absolutely, there were processes that to look at the inter-rater reliability, but all OBIAs are going through a team. So there's a DSS team that and the budget managers in Manufactured Car have been doing this for a long time. We've added some NASC resource to that. So all the indicative ranges are going through that team in the early stages, so we can learn what's coming through and continue that education.
Great. I'm just going to cycle through a few more in the next few minutes. I'd like just to take some time to talk about the fuel issue. So I'll wrap this part of the session up. Question, when a referral is made to a provider, what information will be provided by the NASCs from the OBIA or BAT? Do you know?
Sorry, can you run that past me again?
When a referral is made to a provider, what information will be provided by NASCs from the OBIA or BAT? Will the provider get a copy of the OBIA outcomes and BAT outcomes?
I think we will probably stick with the same thing we've got at the moment, which is that the information belongs to the disabled person, so the disabled person would indicate what they are willing to share with providers. But certainly the expectation is that this is transparent and it will be shared.
Yeah, okay. Just to be very clear, the information OBIA determines the indicative range. Is that correct?
The information in the OBIA determines the indicative range. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And last question, well, before I close this part of the session, for people who have never done an assessment before, which is the cohort you are starting with, how do you know what might be available, e.g. in the questions, what things build and maintain your wellbeing? How could they be more available in their weak questions? Have needs assessors undergone additional training on what else is out there that is not a funding support?
I would have an expectation that NASCs would already know what's out there in the community that is outside of contracted providers. I would have an expectation that that's already happening.
Right. Okay. Well, Simone, thank you very much for that really useful overview. I've certainly learned a lot. And I know others will have as well. Sorry, we've got a question, Tammy.
Sorry, just a quick question about children, because the questions seem to pertain again just to parents and parent support. Our understanding was that children will actually be able to receive direct services now with their funding, because that is actually what parents want. So would that be the question, how can we raise our skills, knowledge, blah, blah, blah? Is that where a parent would indicate that they would like their child to learn skills, or is again that just about the parent learning skills?
Well, I mean, I showed you the adult assessment. There's as I mentioned at the beginning, there's 3 child and youth levels, so the questions are different, so they're more targeted to the parents at the younger age groups. But as for your questions about whether they will get direct services, they can get direct services now.
No, well, not the children that we work with. So the funding,
what do you mean by direct services?
Like speech therapy, occupational therapy,
therapy services. So. Okay, that's different. Therapy services. So yes. Now the funding rules, now the funding purchasing guidelines have come off, yes, they'll be able to access. But the conversation would need to happen that their budget, their indicative range, as they'd need to realise that if they're spending the money on therapies, then that's money that they can't spend elsewhere. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. But most of them would like their children to learn to communicate over, other things. So yep. Great. Okay, wonderful. That's great news. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's not really related to the OBIA. That's related to the fact that the purchasing rules, but the purchasing guidelines have come off. But what that means is, as long as it's in the MyDSS funding plan, then you can spend it on whatever. So I did have slides on the purposes. There's a list of purposes that you can use the funding plan for, but we didn't get that far. But I'll send my slides to Debbie, so she can circulate them.
Sorry,
Deb.
Sorry,
Debbie,
yeah.
do we have to talk about the fuel issue? I'd like to see the DSS funding plan stuff.
Yeah, no, we
Okay, I
do need
thought
to
the
talk about the
topic
fuel
was
funding.
this. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm signing off. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. So for those, I've taken the opportunity to take about 10 minutes to talk to those members who want to get some information about the ongoing fuel issue, which is being highlighted by members as a significant issue. And clearly we are in a position where we need to be looking at the fuel issue in relation to disability support service delivery. So I just wanted to touch base with you all on that. I am posting a quick survey in the chat. You will hopefully also have got something similar out through the newsletter. Wanting to talk about a couple of things that are happening around the fuel supply issue, which I'm sure, as you were all watching on the news, is seeming to escalate in the Middle East, and with little resolution looking potentially possible at this, at this particular minute. So I think
Debbie,
we all need to.
Debs,
Yes.
sorry. Just have a look at the media now. There's been a 2-week pause. There's a 10-point peace plan in place. So it doesn't look like we're going to disappear at midday, which is what
That's great.
it felt like
That's
this morning.
really great. Yes,
So
because of course we had the threat today of Iran being bombed off the face of the earth at lunchtime. So good to hear that that's not going to happen. But it is predicted that this is potentially going to create issues for us. So we need to be focusing on this. NZDSN has been working actively with government to highlight the disability support service need in this area. And we were part of the lobbying to get support workers considered alongside the family credit uplift that happened a couple of weeks back to recognise the fuel cost of fuel for families. Last week you will have heard on Thursday that the government has increased the in-between work travel line in home and community support contracts by 30%. We were hopeful that would be extrapolated through to other similar disability support services, but that announcement didn't come. And so we have confirmed this week that uplift only applies to home and community support service providers who have in between travel line in their contracts. It doesn't apply to any other disability support or health-based or ACC-based contract. So we've gone back to DSS and said that the key characteristics of the in-between travel are that the support worker is needing to travel between people's homes generally, and they are using their own vehicles. So DSS is very focused on that criteria. We are arguing that disability support service providers also require support workers to work in that context, and that the same increase should be applied across the sector. We're providers can evidence that they are delivering services in a similar way to home and community support services, and where in between travel and a person using their own vehicle applies. So we have put a quick survey together. We would be very grateful if our members could complete that. We're asking for it to be completed by tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m, and we will then use that information when we're talking to largely MSD at this point. So just being clear that we've identified DSS contracts, and we've also identified the MSD employment and vocational contracts as both areas that MSD need to be focusing on. Did you say that link didn't work for you, David? I'll just see if I can. Yeah, it's coming up on mine.
Going to your news article.
Same here.
It's interesting. Okay, I will. It's something very odd is going on. Yeah, some people are getting it, some aren't. But if I'll send it back round with the right link. But if people could please complete that. The other thing that DSS has agreed to do is set up a fuel supply subgroup through the Chief Executive Forum that it has, and NZDSN is co-chair of that forum. So we've sent out invitations to chief executives who are sitting on that forum to nominate a smaller group who can come together weekly and meet with DSS and give on the ground information and intelligence, and make sure that disability support services continue to be considered as part of the government's fuel response plan. So I just really wanted to say it's really disappointing to hear that the 30% increase has only gone to one contract line. We're very clear that the relief should be applied where it's needed, not where the contracts make it more simple for government to provide the uplift. So we'll continue to advocate on that basis. So if there's any questions around that, please reach out, and just know that we here at NZDSN are actively working on this issue for the sake of our sector, and recognise that there are some significant risks. We're also talking to DSS about cost of living increases, and acknowledging that the petrol in the petrol crisis and the Middle East issue is not only impacting cost of petrol, it's actually now broadly more impacting on cost of living, and DSS have assured us that they will be looking at cost of living as a result of this issue in their upcoming funding conversations that they're having. So that's the very short update from me. I'm sorry that we can't be bringing better news in relation to the relief, but as I say, we'll continue working on that. Yeah. It says recosts about the increase to minimum wage and sleepovers. Do you know if any variations will come? No, I don't know that off the back of my hand, but certainly these are conversations that we need to be having, and we'll let you know. Yes, and increased KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver's just gone on the 1st of April as well. There's a lot out there, and we're being very, very clear with DSS that the increases that they did get last budget because of the world happenings are being very quickly eaten up and disappearing into that wider context, so people aren't feeling that they've got increases or more to play with. Yes, so Jay's just asked about the adjustment in the residential subsidy going up. We met with DSS at our board meeting and specifically raised this, and DSS was going to commit to making sure that the increase in the residential subsidy came to providers, and it didn't get swallowed up in the offset that DSS take from it. So please let me know if you are not seeing that increase come through, and we'll follow that up. Yes, Pip, I agree. I think we're getting close to a broader survey that looks at how providers are faring through this particular tricky time.
I'd say, Debbie, to just jump in because I can. You know, things were bad during the COVID times, and we entered into this new era with hope and optimism. But that's from where I'm sitting, I despair, quite frankly.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we feel your pain, and please use your networks, and we really encourage, we're seeing some providers connecting in with each other and being able to share similar frustrations or share contingency plans, and what you might do is a really important part of your planning at the moment. But we'll
I think
continue.
that's been a feature of the network for a long time. But I personally think that, you know, the handling of the current crisis is just the cumulative impact on what, quite frankly, has been a really tricky thing to roll out. And yeah, as Simone probably more eloquently said, you know, it's all been done in haste. And from Simone's presentation, thanks, Simone, for that. It's good. One of the key issues we were trying to solve as part of this reset was consistency of approach. And I'm not convinced that we're hearing any of that yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
The financial sustainability issue.
Yeah, thank you very much to the members who have joined us today. We really appreciate it, and thank you for letting me take that last 10 minutes just to talk about this fuel issue. And thank you very much to those of you who can fill out the survey, and I'll drop it again back in the chat once I've sorted out why it keeps flicking between our media release. And big thank you to you, Simone. It's fantastic having you here and being able to share your knowledge with us. It's a great opportunity for members to find out about all the new changes that are coming up, and we'll keep coming back with our questions. So I'll close with karakia, and I hope you all go and enjoy the rest of your day. Kia whakaria te tapu, kia watia ati ara, kia tupa ai, te mahi ati katoa, humie, huie, takie. Thank you very much.